Hello viewers, welcome back to my channel Legal Decipher. In the previous video, we had discussed up to section 163 from chapter 12 of the Code of Criminal Procedure. If you have not seen that video, then go and check it. The link is in the description below. Today we are going to talk about the rest of the sections of chapter 12. We'll go through the chapter and try to understand how the Code of Criminal Procedure works and how the criminal courts perform. If you are new here, please like and subscribe to my channel so you can get the video notifications. So let's get started. So in this video, we are going to talk about the rest of the sections of chapter 12. So in the previous video, we had discussed up to section 163. In this video, we are going to talk about section 164, which is recording of confessions and statements. So any metropolitan magistrate or judicial magistrate may, whether he has the jurisdiction or not in a particular case, record any confession or statement. Okay, so section 164 deals with a statement made before the magistrate, or it is widely known as the 164 statement. Now this section has a wide application, so it is very important. Now what does this section say? It says irrespective of their jurisdiction, a metropolitan or a judicial magistrate may record the confession or statement in course of investigation or any other time after or before the commencement of inquiry or trial. So the magistrate has the power to record a confession or a statement at any stage of proceedings. Now this conversation may also be audiographed or videographed, and in the presence of an advocate. So it shall be done in the presence of an advocate, and audio-visual methods can also be applied in this section. So the advocate for the accused person will be present during the 164 statement, and such confession shall not be made by a police officer who has been conferred with the powers of a magistrate. So a police officer who has been conferred the powers of a magistrate will not take a 164 statement. The magistrate will inform the person that the person is not bound by law to make confession, but if he does so, then the same may be used against him. So what does subsection 2 say? It says that it is not necessary for the accused person to make a confession before the magistrate. He can not make a confession as well, and that will also be informed to him by the magistrate. The magistrate will actually inform him that you do not need to answer any confession. You do not need to make any confession. Now, irrespective of having the knowledge that a confession is not necessary to be made by such accused, even though that accused, if he makes any such confession before the magistrate, then it may be used against him as an evidence in that particular case. Now it is also written in subsection 2 that the magistrate will only record the statement if it is believed to be made voluntarily by the accused. So a statement under section 164 will only be recorded if it is made voluntarily. Now subsection 3 says that if a person appearing before the magistrate states that he is not willing to make a confession, then the magistrate shall not authorize the detention of such person in police custody. So the magistrate has no power to take that man into police custody if he is not willing to make a confession before the magistrate. Subsection 4 says any such confession that shall be recorded in the manner provided in section 281 for recording the examination of an accused person. So the format or the procedure of recording such examination by the magistrate of the accused person will be in the same manner as it is written in section 281, and according to that particular procedure the confession will be recorded, and that confession will be signed by the person who made such confession, and the magistrate shall make a memorandum at the foot of such recording. What will be the memorandum? The memorandum will be like this. that is written here. It will say that I have explained to, the name will be put there of the person who has made that confession, that he is not bound to make a confession, and that if he does so, any confession he may make may be used as evidence against him, and I believe that this confession was voluntarily made. It was taken in my presence and hearing, and was read over to the person making it, admitted by him to be correct, and it contains a full and true account of the statement made by him. And then the magistrate will sign here, just like this. This will be the format. Okay. Now, subsection 5 says, any statement other than a confession made under subsection 1 shall be recorded in the manner hereinafter provided for the recording of evidence, as in the opinion of the magistrate best fitted to the circumstances of the case. So, irrespective of any confessions made, other statements may also be recorded under section 164, and the magistrate shall have the power to administer oath to the person whose statement is so recorded. So, the person will be making those statements on oath. Now, section 5A says that in cases that are punishable of any offense against a woman. Now, we know the sections regarding the punishment of offenses against women. They are section 354, 354A, B, C, D, and 376, 376A, B, C, D, E, and 509 of Indian Penal Code. In all those cases, the statement will be recorded as soon as the commission of the offence is brought to the notice of the police. So, whenever the police is informed, then and there a magistrate will take the statement of that victim, provided that if the person making the statement is temporarily or permanently mentally or physically disabled. So, if the victim is anyhow disabled, whether temporary or permanent, whether mental or physical, if the victim is anyhow disabled, then the magistrate shall take the assistance of an interpreter or a special educator in recording the statement. So, the help of an interpreter or special educator will be taken for the purposes of recording of the statement, and this recording of statement shall also be videographed. Okay. Now, a statement recorded under clause A of the person who is temporarily or permanently so disabled, either mentally or physically, shall be considered a statement in lieu of examination in chief. So, it will be considered as a examination in chief of that person, as specified in section 137 of Indian Evidence Act. Now, section 137 of Indian Evidence Act talks about 3 kinds of examinations. They are examination in chief, cross examination, and re-examination. We will read about it when we discuss about the Indian Evidence Act. Now, according to this clause, the person who is so disabled shall make a statement, and that will be regarded as an examination in chief, and the maker of the statement can be cross-examined on such statement without the need for recording the same at the time of trial. So, it will not be again recorded at the time of trial. It will be so recorded like a examination in chief, and such statement will have the validity of a examination in chief that can be cross-examined on a later stage of the trial. Now, subsection 6 says the magistrate recording a confession or statement under this section shall forward it to the magistrate by whom the case is to be inquired into or tried. So, one magistrate will take the confession or statement and record it, and he will then and there forward it to the magistrate who is in charge of inquiry or trial of that particular case. Now let's move on to the next section, section 164A, which says in cases of rape, when the investigation is on, the victim will be provided with examination by medical expert who shall be a registered medical practitioner employed in a government hospital or by other medical practitioner with the consent of the victim or her guardian if no government medical practitioner is available there. So, in cases of rape, the victim will always be provided with a examination by a medical expert. Okay, so when the investigation of a rape is going on, then the victim will be examined by a medical expert, and such medical examination shall be conducted always by a registered medical practitioner who is employed in a hospital run by the government. and if such medical practitioner is not available there, then any other registered medical practitioner, provided that such registered medical practitioner may only conduct such examination if such woman, such victim, consents, or any other person who can give consent on her behalf. If she is unable to give consent, then only on the consent of such woman or her guardian such medical practitioner may conduct the examination. Now, it will be done within 24 hours from the time of receiving the information. So, it will not be delayed, it will be done within 24 hours as soon as the information of such offense is received. Now, the registered medical practitioner to whom such woman is sent shall without delay examine that woman and prepare a report of this examination giving all the following particulars. So, the medical practitioner will not cause any delay and examine her right away and prepare a report for the examination giving out the following particulars. What are those particulars? They are the name and address of the woman and the person by whom she was brought. So the report will contain the name and address of the woman, the victim, and by whom she was brought before the medical officer, and the age of the woman, and the description of material taken from the person or the woman for DNA profiling. So what kind of material was taken for DNA profiling will be in the descriptions of such medical report. Also, if there is any marks of injury on the body of such woman, so if there is any marks or injury, then that will also be recorded in such examination report. Also, the general mental condition of the woman will be recorded, and other material particulars in reasonable detail will be provided or given. Now, the report shall state precisely the reasons for each conclusion arrived. So, the medical practitioner will always leave an impression as to what such medical officer has found during the conduct of such examination. Now, the report shall precisely reflect all such reasons for conclusions that are arrived at, and the report shall specifically record that the consent of the woman or her relative who was there to give consent on her behalf was obtained prior to such examination. So the consent was taken, that shall be mentioned in the record, and the exact time of commencement and completion of the examination will also be noted. So when was the examination started and when it ended will also be mentioned there in the report. Now, the registered medical practitioner shall without delay forward the report to the investigating officer, who shall further forward it to the magistrate. So the medical practitioner, after conducting such examination, make a report specifying all these details and immediately forward it to the investigating officer, and such investigating officer will forthwith forward it to the concerned magistrate. Now, subsection 7 says that nothing in this section shall be construed as rendering lawful any examination without the consent of the woman. So, the consent of the woman before taking such examination is extremely necessary. Without obtaining such consent, the entire examination, the medical report, everything will be of null and void. Now, the explanation says that examination and registered medical practitioner shall have the same meaning as in section 53. So, we have already read that. We know what is an examination and what is a registered medical practitioner. Now, let's move on to section 165. It says search by police officer. So, the police officer under section 165 has the power to search. Whenever an officer in charge of a police station or a police officer making an investigation has reasonable grounds for believing that there is any object or thing or material that may be found in any place within the limits of the police station that he is in charge of, and that such thing cannot in his opinion be otherwise obtained without undue delay. So if the police officer gets the information or has reasonable grounds for believing that there is certain article or material or anything that he needs to find out, and he gets information that it is in such a place that comes within the jurisdiction of such police station that he is in charge of, so he may actually search that place. And if he is of the view that the search is to be made without making any undue delay, after recording the grounds in writing so far as possible, search that place or make a search for that place or cause the place to be searched for any such thing that he believes is in that particular place. Now, a police officer proceeding under subsection 1 shall, if practicable, conduct the search in person. So, if it is practicable, he will appear in person in that particular area and make the search physically. Now, if he is unable to conduct such a search in person, then he will appoint any other person, or if such any other person is not available there, then he may also delegate a subordinate police officer to search that place along with a order in writing specifying the place that is to be searched and what kind of article or material is to be searched, or what articles or materials that subordinate police officer will be looking for. And the subordinate officer may, upon such order, search the place for such thing. Now, the provisions of this code as to search warrants and general provisions of searches contained in section 100 that we have already read shall, so far as may be practicable, apply to this section as well. Now, copies of any record made under subsection 1 or 3 shall be forthwith sent to the nearest magistrate. So, the magistrate who has the local jurisdiction upon that particular place shall be forthwith sent a copy of the record, who can take cognizance of such offence, and if it is so necessary found by the magistrate, then the same magistrate will also furnish a free of cost copy to the owner or occupier of that place. Which place? That place that was searched for. Let's move on to section 166. It says, when officer in charge of a police station may require another to issue search warrant. So, if a police officer in charge of a police station or an officer not below the rank of a sub-inspector is making an investigation, then he may require an officer in charge of another police station, whether in the same or different district, to cause a search to be made in any place that the former officer might do so within the limits of his own station. So, a police officer may also request another police officer to make a search in his place of jurisdiction if such officer is investigating and he thinks that a search is needed to be made. Now, such officer, on being so required, shall proceed according to the provisions of section 165 and shall forward the thing found, if any, to the officer at whose request the search was made. So, this officer who is presently in charge of making the search, he will now comply with the provisions of section 165, and if he finds such thing, then he will transfer the thing to the police officer who requested him to make the search. Now, if the police officer who is in charge of the investigation understands that it might result in the destruction or concealment of the evidence of such offence, then it will be lawful for him to make the search on his own, even if he is acting in a different jurisdiction. So, the territorial jurisdiction will not be a bar for a police officer who is investigating an offence and he wants to make a search if it is of his opinion, or if he believes that if he tries to take the help of a different police officer, then that procedure will be lengthy, and in that time the evidence that he is looking for may be destroyed or concealed. Now let's move on to subsection 4. It says any officer conducting a search under subsection 3 shall be forthwith sent notice of the search to the officer in charge of the police station within whose local jurisdiction he is operating. So the local police officer will be informed, and also a report will be made in that regard if something is found, and it will be prepared under section 100, and it shall also be sent to the nearest magistrate empowered to take cognizance of the offense. So both the local police officer and the local magistrate will be informed, and such reports will be sent to them, and a copy of the records as mentioned in subsection 1 and 3 of section 165 will be forwarded. Now subsection 5 says the owner or occupier of the place where the search was made shall on application be furnished with a free of cost copy of any record that is sent to the magistrate under subsection 4. Now the next two sections talk about letters of request to competent authority for investigation in a country or place outside India, and letter of request from a country or place outside India to a court or authority for investigation in India. So these two sections talk about investigation relating to a foreign place or country, that is a place outside India. So section 166A says that if in the course of an investigation into an offense an application is made by the investigating officer or any superior police officer that evidence is necessary of a person who is presently residing in a country or place that is outside the territorial jurisdiction of India, then any criminal court may issue a letter of request to that court or authority in that country or place who is competent to deal with such request that is made by the Indian criminal court in this behalf. And following that letter of request, an examination may be orally done by that competent authority on this behalf to any person who is supposed to be acquainted with the facts and circumstances of a case that is ongoing in India, here in this criminal court, and record such statement made in the course of such examination, and also require such person or other persons to produce any document or thing which may be in their possession. So by following this procedure, a person who is residing outside of India, his statements can be recorded as evidence, or a particular document or thing that is in possession of that person may be recovered by this procedure. And all these evidences can be so taken or collected and thereof forwarded to the court that issued such letter. Now the letter of request shall be transmitted in any manner that is prescribed by the central government in this behalf, and every statement recorded or document or thing received under subsection 1 shall be deemed to be the evidence collected during the course of investigation. Now the same thing will happen if a foreign country's court or a foreign place who has a competent authority, that competent authority or that foreign court requests any such taking of evidence through a letter of request to any Indian court, then the same will be forwarded to the chief metropolitan magistrate or chief judicial magistrate or such other magistrate that may be appointed in this behalf, who shall thereupon, after receiving such request, summon the person before him. So he will receive the request and then act accordingly. He will summon the person and require him to appear before him and record his statement or cause the document or thing to be produced that is asked for. Or he may send the letter to any police officer for investigation, who shall thereupon investigate into the offence in the same manner. as if the offense had been committed within India. So the procedure that will be followed here in India will be equivalent to that if the offense had been committed within India and regarding that offense an investigation was going on. So the procedures will be same, and by following this procedure the letter of request of that foreign country or authority will be carried out. And subsection 2 says all the evidences taken or collected shall be forwarded by the magistrate or police officer to the central government. So after taking that evidence or recovering such document or thing, the same will be forwarded to the central government for transmission to the court or authority who has issued such letter or request in such manner as the central government may deem fit. So the transfer of such evidence or document or thing will be done by the central government, but the process will be carried out by the magistrate, or the magistrate may also empower the police officer for investigation upon this same subject matter. Now let's move on to the next section, section 167. It is a long section, so we'll understand this slowly. It talks about the procedure when investigation cannot be completed in 24 hours. So we already know that when the police officer arrests a person, then he has to commit that person before the magistrate within 24 hours. Now, what happens if the investigation does not complete within 24 hours? Now, it is very likely that the investigation will never complete within 24 hours. It cannot be done so by exercising any kind of competency. Now, what will happen? What will be the procedure? So, if it appears that the investigation cannot be completed within 24 hours, that is fixed within section 57, then if there are grounds for believing that the accusation or information that is received is well founded against such offender, then the police officer will forthwith transmit such offender to the nearest judicial magistrate, and along with that a copy of the entries that were made in the diary will also be forwarded to the magistrate that is related to this case. Now, the magistrate to whom an accused person is forwarded under this section, whether he has or has not jurisdiction to try the case, now this person will be forwarded to the magistrate within 24 hours to the local magistrate. Now, if the local magistrate finds out that he does not have the jurisdiction to try this case, then he may from time to time authorize the detention of the accused in such custody as he may think fit for a term not exceeding 15 days. So, the magistrate will commit him into custody for a term not exceeding 15 days in a whole. That means at one time. So once he is committed to the custody, then he will be called upon before the magistrate only after 15 days in total. Now, if such magistrate finds out this case will have to be transferred to a magistrate who has the local jurisdiction of that case, then such case will be forwarded to a magistrate who is having such jurisdiction. Now, provided that the magistrate may authorize the detention of the accused person otherwise than in custody of the police. So either the magistrate can transfer the person to the police custody or in judicial custody if he is satisfied that the proceedings will take long to get completed. Now, this person will be commuted to JC or judicial custody. Now, this person may also be taken into PC, police custody. The police custody is taken when the police needs the information from that person regarding that offense that he has committed. And once the person is committed to police custody, then the police will have to tell the magistrate as to for how many days the police wants to take the offender into their custody. But if the offender is committed to a judicial custody, then at a time he will be in the custody for 15 days. Now this procedure will keep going on until a total period of 90 days is covered when such investigation relates to an offence punishable with death, imprisonment for life, or imprisonment for a term not less than 10 years. But such total custody will be of 60 days in relation to investigation of any other offence. And on the expiry of the period of said 90 days or 60 days, as the case may be, the accused person shall be released on bail if he is prepared to furnish bonds. So, the person, for the sake of the investigation, will be in either judicial custody or police custody. Now, police custody is not allowed that much, but the person will mostly be in judicial custody, and this person will be in judicial custody for a period of 60 days if it is relating to any other offence, and but this person will be in judicial custody for 90 days if the offence that he has committed is punishable with death, imprisonment for life, or imprisonment for a term not less than 10 years. Now, after that period is expired, the offender will be released on bail if he furnishes the bond. Now, it is also said that no magistrate shall authorize the detention of any accused in custody of the police under this section unless the accused is produced before him for the first time, and also for every subsequent time till the accused remains in custody of the police. So, as long as the police is presenting that person before the magistrate as required by the magistrate through order, or unless he is produced before the magistrate on the very first instance within 24 hours of the commission of that offence, then as long as that person is presented before the magistrate in such manner, then the magistrate will allow the person to be committed in custody of the police. So the police custody will be allowed. But the magistrate may extend further detention in judicial custody on production of the accused either in person or through electronic video linkage. So, unless and until the police asks for remand, then the accused will be transferred to judicial custody and he will be produced every 15 days through personal appearance or through electronic video linkage. Now, it is also said that no magistrate of the second class, not specially empowered by High Court, shall authorize detention in the custody of police. So, PC or police custody will not be allowed by a second class magistrate. It will always be allowed by a first class magistrate or the chief judicial magistrate. Now, the explanation says that for the avoidance of doubt, it is hereby mentioned specifically that the accused shall be detained in custody as long as he does not furnish bail. So, if the accused person is released on bail but he fails to furnish the bonds, then he will be taken into custody and detained there as long as he does not furnish the bond. And the second explanation says that if any question arises whether an accused person was produced before the magistrate or not, then such production will be proved by the signature of that person in the order that authorized his detention or the order that is certified by the magistrate to produce the accused by electronic video linkage medium. Provided further that in any case of a woman under 18 years of age, so if the offender or any other person who is a woman and is of below 18 years of age, then the detention of such woman shall be authorized in the custody of a remand home or recognized social institution. So that woman offender or that woman person who is under the age of 18 years will not be committed to judicial custody or police custody. She will always be committed to a remand home or a recognized social institution. Now, subsection 2A says that notwithstanding anything contained in subsection 1 or 2, the officer in charge of a police station or the officer in charge who is taking up such investigation, or the officer if he is not below the rank of a sub-inspector, may, where a judicial officer is not available, So there may be a case that a judicial magistrate is not then and there available. Then such offender will be transmitted by such police officer to the nearest executive magistrate, on whom the powers of a judicial magistrate or metropolitan magistrate have been conferred. And such executive magistrate may, for reasons to be recorded in writing, authorize the detention of that accused person into custody as he may think fit. But the executive magistrate, while authorizing the detention of an offender, will not allow the detention of such person more than 7 days in aggregate. So he will always be committing such offender to a custody for a total of 7 days at a time, and the accused person shall be released on bail except where an order for further detention of the accused person is made by such magistrate competent to make such order. So this person will be released on bail if a competent magistrate to make such detention order is not available there or has not made such order against that person. Now, provided that executive magistrate shall transmit to the nearest judicial magistrate the records of the case together with a copy of the entries in the diary relating to that case. So the entries of the police diary will be, that is known as the case diary or CD, will be along with the record sent to the nearest judicial magistrate by the executive magistrate. So the executive magistrate will not take this matter into his own hands. He will transfer the record and the case diary to the nearest judicial magistrate. And a magistrate who is authorizing the detention of a offender in the police custody shall record his reasons for doing so. Also, the magistrate other than the chief judicial magistrate shall make such order and forward a copy of this order with his reasons to the chief judicial magistrate. So if the magistrate who is authorizing such detention is other than a chief judicial magistrate, who is below the rank of a chief judicial magistrate, then he will send the copy of such order along with the reasons to the chief judicial magistrate. Now subsection 5 says that if any case is triable by a magistrate and the case is of a summons case, then the investigation will continue for 6 months. And if such investigation is not concluded within 6 months, then the accused will be released who was arrested. The accused who was arrested will be released. Unless and until the officer who is making such investigation is satisfies the magistrate that there are special reasons or interests of justice for the continuation of such investigation beyond the period of 6 months. Now subsection 6 says that where any order for stopping of any investigation is made and the aggrieved party has moved before the sessions judge and the sessions judge is satisfied, further investigation is ought to be made regarding that offence. It needs to be made. Then he may vacate the order that was made under subsection 5 to discontinue the investigation, and he may also direct further investigation to be made into the subject matter and may also put forward such and such directions with regard to bail and other matters as he may specify. Now section 168 says that a report of investigation by a subordinate officer shall be made under this chapter and he shall report the result of such investigation to the officer in charge of the police station. So he will report such result to the officer in charge of a police station. Now section 169 says that release of accused when evidence is deficient. Now if it appears to a police officer in charge of a police station that there is not sufficient evidence or reasonable ground of suspicion to justify the forwarding of the accused to a magistrate, then if such person is in custody, the police officer may release him by executing a bond with or without sureties, as such officer may think fit, and he may also cause that person to appear if and when so required before a magistrate empowered to take cognizance of the offence on a police report and try the accused or commit him for trial. So these are the options that are available before the police officer, and he will act accordingly. Now what will happen if the police officer believes that the case is to be sent to the magistrate and where evidence is sufficient? So section 170 talks about this situation. So if the police officer thinks fit that there are sufficient evidence or reasonable grounds as aforesaid, then such officer shall forward the accused under custody to a magistrate who is empowered to take cognizance of the offence, and the police officer shall also file a police report before the magistrate to try the accused or commit him for trial. If the offence is bailable and the accused is able to give security, then such security from him for appearance before such magistrate on a fixed date will be taken from him, and thereafter he will be ordered to attend day to day before that magistrate until otherwise directed. Now, after taking such bond, the police officer shall send it to the magistrate, and along with it, if there is any weapon or other article that is necessary to produce, then it will also be such magistrate, and he may also make that person to execute a bond to appear before the magistrate as directed thereby and prosecute or give evidence in the matter of the charge against such accused. Now subsection 3 says, if the court of the chief judicial magistrate is mentioned in the bond, then such court may also refer to any other magistrate for the purposes of inquiry or trial of such case that is referred to, and provide reasonable notice to such complainant or persons about this reference. And subsection 4 says, the officer in whose presence the bond is executed shall deliver a copy thereof to one of the persons who executed it, and shall then send it to the magistrate, the original with his report. So the police officer will send the original bond to the magistrate along with the report that he has prepared on that behalf, and a copy of that bond will be given to the persons who had executed it. Now let's move on to section 171. It says, complainant and witness not to be required to accompany police officer and not to be subjected to restraint. So a complainant or a witness, if he is on his way to any court, then he shall not be required to accompany a police officer, or he shall not be subject to unnecessary restraint or inconvenience. Also, he will not have to give any other security for his appearance other than his own bond. So these three things told by section 171. Now, provided that if any complainant or witness refuses to attend or execute a bond as directed in section 170, then the officer in charge of the police station may forward him to the custody of the magistrate. So if he refuses to execute a personal bond, then the police officer may forward him to the custody of a magistrate, who may detain him in custody until he executes such bond. Now the magistrate will have the power to detain such person until he executes a bond or until the hearing of the case is completed. Now section 172 talks about the diary that the police is maintaining regarding an investigation. So it basically talks about the CD or the case diary. So every police officer making an investigation under this chapter shall day by day enter his proceedings of the investigation in the diary. So the police officer will maintain a diary in respect of each and every case that he takes up for investigation, and he shall make entries on day-to-day basis in that particular diary regarding the investigation that he had done on that particular day, setting forth the time at which the information reached him. He will mention as to at what time the information that he received was communicated to him, and the time at which he began and closed his investigation. So he will also mention the time when he started to investigate and closed his investigation. The place or places visited by him, he will also mention the places that he had to visit for the sake of such investigation, and a statement of the circumstances ascertained through his investigation. So he will also jot down what he found at the site of that investigation. The statements of witnesses recorded during the course of investigation under section 161 shall be inserted in the case diary. So in the police diary, the 161 statements of various persons who are related anyhow to the investigation will be recorded. Now the diary referred to in subsection 1 shall be a volume and duly paginated. So the case diary will be maintained as a volume and it will be paged, which means the page markings will be there. Now subsection 2 says any criminal court may send for the police diaries of a case under inquiry or trial in such court. So the court may call for the CD and may use such diaries not as evidence in the case but to aid in such inquiry or trial. So the case diary will not be used as an evidence in the case, but the court may call for such case diary for the help in inquiry or trial that is ongoing. Now subsection 3 says neither the accused nor his agents shall be entitled to call for such diaries. Now the criminal or his agents, the accused person or his pleader cannot call for such diaries, nor shall he or they be entitled to see them. So the accused party will not be entitled to see those case diaries as to what are the contents of such case diary, merely because they are referred by the court. But if they are used by the police officer who made them to refresh his memory, so if the police officer uses such case diary to refresh the memory of the accused, or if the court uses them for the purpose of contradicting such police officer, then the provisions of section 161 or 145, as the case may be, of the Indian evidence will apply. So we had read about how the police officer submits a report after the completion of an investigation before the magistrate. Now we will understand under section 173 as to how such report is made on the completion of an investigation by a police officer. So it says every investigation under this chapter shall be completed without unnecessary delay. So the report will be submitted and the investigation shall be completed within reasonable time or without unnecessary delay. The investigation in relation to rape of a child may be completed within 3 months. So in case of rape of a child, the investigation needs to be completed within 3 months from the date on which such information was recorded by the officer in charge of a police station. Now, as soon as the investigation is complete, the officer in charge of a police station shall forward to a magistrate empowered to take cognizance of the offence on a police report a report in the form prescribed by the state government. So the state government has already prescribed a format as to how such a report will be submitted by the police officer. Now what will such a report contain? The report will contain the name of the parties, the nature of the information, the name of the persons who appear to be acquainted with the circumstances of the case, whether any offence appears to be committed, or if it is committed, then by whom, whether the accused has been arrested or not, whether he has been released on bond or not, and if he is so released, then with or without sureties, that will also be mentioned there, whether he has been forwarded in custody under section 170 or not, and when the case is relating to an offence punishable under section 376, 376A, B, C, D or E, then in that cases if there is a medical examination or not, and the report of such medical examination should also be mentioned in the report. The officer shall also communicate as to what actions are taken by him to the persons by whom the information relating to the commission of offence was first given. So the FIR maker will be communicated by the police officer as to what actions he has taken on basis of such information. And where a superior officer of police has been appointed under section 158 by any general or special order of the state government, then such police report will be submitted by that superior officer. Okay. Now subsection 4 says, whenever it appears from the report that the accused has been released on personal bond, then the magistrate shall make such order for the discharge of such bond, or otherwise if he thinks fit. Now when such report is in respect to a case to which section 170 applies, the police officer shall forward the magistrate along with his report these two things. What are they? All the documents or relevant extracts on which the prosecution proposes to rely other than those already sent to the magistrate during investigation. So all other documents that the prosecution thinks fit to prove his case will be sent to the magistrate along with the other relevant documents that are already sent to the magistrate during the investigation. Also, the statements that are recorded under section 161 will also be forwarded. The statements of those persons who the prosecution proposes to examine as witness. Now subsection 6 says that if the police officer is of the opinion that any part of any such statement is not relevant to the subject matter, so he has taken such statement but he afterwards believe that this statement does not relate to the subject matter or it is not relevant for the purposes of this case, then he may, for the interest of justice, indicate to the magistrate and request him on a note that the magistrate may exclude that part from the copies so forwarded in respect of this investigation, and he shall also state his reasons for making such request as to why he is so requesting. Now subsection 7 says, where the police officer investigating the case finds it convenient to do so, he may furnish the accused all or any of the documents copies that are referred to in subsection 5. Now subsection 8 also says that nothing in this section shall be deemed to preclude further investigation. So the police officer who is taking up an investigation may submit his report to the magistrate, but afterwards if he finds or obtains further evidence, oral or documentary, then he may also make such further investigation and forward such findings to the magistrate through a further report. And in this case, the provisions of subsection 2 to 6 shall apply regarding the further investigation and the further report. Now let's move on to section 174. It says police to inquire and report on suicide, etc. So if the death is an unnatural death or it is a suicide, then how will the police inquire into the matter and how the police will report? So when the officer in charge of a police station, empowered by the state government or in general, receives an information that a person has committed suicide or has been killed by another person or by an animal or by any machinery or by accident, so the cause of the death is unnatural or has died under circumstances raising a reasonable suspicion that some other person has committed an offence, he shall immediately give intimation regarding this death to the nearest executive magistrate empowered to hold inquests. Okay, and he shall proceed to the place physically where the body of such deceased person is recovered, and he will, in the presence of two or more respectable inhabitants of the neighborhood, shall make an investigation. So he will make an investigation in the presence of two or more persons in the locality and draw up a report of the apparent cause of death, describing the wounds, fractures, bruises, or any other marks of injury as may be found on the dead body, and shall also state in what manner or by what weapon or instrument, if any, such marks appear to have been inflicted. So this procedure is called the making of an inquest report. So in CRPC we will come to know about two reports, that is the inquest report and the viscera report. So I'll give a brief description of what these two mean. Now an inquest report is a report that is made primarily to look into the causes of any unnatural death. So if an unnatural death is occurred, then what is the cause of such death is to be looked into, and the primary evidences that are collected from the scene of such death will be made as a report by the police officer, and this report will be called an inquest report. It is just a formal report that is made to identify the body or to give a brief explanation about the causes of such unnatural death. Now what does viscera mean? Viscera report means a thorough test of the internal organs of the dead body, explicitly those within the chest, abdomen and pelvic area, for signs of poisons or other abnormalities etc., or swabs etc. in cases of rape. So the difference between an inquest report and a viscera report is that an inquest report is a formal details that is made to understand the cause of an unnatural death, while a viscera report generally includes chemical tests and other complex procedures. Now section 174 talks about the police who is enquiring and reporting a suicide or any other unnatural death and making such inquest report regarding such unnatural death. Now subsection 2 says the report shall be signed by such police officer and other persons or by so many of them as concurred therein, and shall be forthwith forwarded to the district magistrate or the subdivisional magistrate. So the police will make that report and forward it to the magistrate. When the case involves suicide of a woman within 7 years of her marriage, or the case relates to the death of a woman within 7 years of her marriage in circumstances that raises a reasonable suspicion that some other person has committed an offense in relation to such woman, in these cases, or the case that relates to the death of a woman within 7 years of her marriage and any relative of the woman has made a request in this behalf, or there is any doubt regarding the cause of the death, or the police officer for any other reason considers it expedient to do so, then in all these cases the police officer shall, subject to the rules prescribed by state government, forward the body. So he will actually forward the dead body with a view to examine it to the nearest civil surgeon. So the police officer will forward such dead body to the nearest civil surgeon for examination of such dead body, or other qualified medical man appointed in this behalf by state government, if the state of weather and the distance puts a risk of such putrefaction on the road as would render such examination useless. So if the police officer understands that the nature of the weather is such, or the distance between the place of occurrence and the medical procedure that is to be done on such dead body is at such a distance that it would render it useless to conduct any examination, the body will simply rot on such unnecessary delay, then he will forthwith send the dead body to a qualified medical man if no civil surgeon is available in the locality within the jurisdiction. The following magistrates are empowered to hold inquests, namely any district magistrate or subdivisional magistrate or any other executive magistrate specially appointed, or the district magistrate. So these are the qualified magistrates who can hold inquests. Now section 175 says power to summon persons. So the police officer has power to summon any person who appears to him that he knows the facts and circumstances of the case, or he can answer the questions that arise out of such investigation. So he may summon 2 or more persons as aforesaid for purposes of helping into the investigation by answering truly to all the questions that is put forward to him in regard to that investigation. But he is not bound to attend or answer any question that has a tendency to expose him to a criminal charge or a penalty or forfeiture. Now, if the facts do not disclose a cognizable offence to which the section 170 applies, then such person shall not be required by the police officer to attend a magistrate's court. Now, let's move on to the last section of this chapter. It says inquiry by magistrate into cause of death. So the magistrate or the nearest magistrate empowered to hold such inquest shall also have the power to hold an inquiry into the cause of the death, either instead of or in addition to the investigation held by the police officer. So the police officer is already engaged in investigation. Either instead of the police officer or in addition to that police officer's investigation, the magistrate may also hold an inquiry. He is empowered to do so. Now, where any person dies or disappears, or a rape is alleged to have been committed on a woman, while such person or woman was in the custody of police or any other custody authorized by the magistrate or the court, then the magistrate shall, in addition to that inquiry or investigation already been held by the police, further inquire differently or separately within whose local jurisdiction the offence has committed. The magistrate holding such inquiry shall record the evidence taken by him in connection therewith in the same manner as prescribed in the circumstances of a case. Now, wherever such magistrate considers it expedient to make an examination of the dead body in order to discover the causes of death, then the magistrate may do so. Where an inquiry is to be held under this section, the magistrate shall, whenever practicable, inform the relatives of the deceased whose names and addresses are known, and shall allow them to remain present at the inquiry. So the relatives can be made present during the inquiry, and the judicial magistrate or the metropolitan magistrate or executive magistrate or police officer holding an inquiry or investigation shall, within 24 hours of the death of the person, forward such dead body to the nearest civil surgeon for examination, and if he is not available, to other qualified medical persons appointed by state government in this behalf. Unless it is not possible to do so, then in that case the reasons for non-possibility shall also be recorded in writing. So this is the whole section. Now the explanation says that the expression relative means parents, children, brothers, sisters and spouse. So it is an exhaustive expression. These persons will only include into the term relative. So that's all in this video. If you like my videos, then don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching this video.